Hello, my name is Ian. Welcome to my presentation on improving human activity recognition through self-training with unlabeled data using a novel method called self-HAR. This work is a collaboration between different researchers from the University of Cambridge. To begin, I would like to give some background. Human activity recognition, HAR, is the task of identifying what the user is doing, such as whether the user is running or walking, from sensor data. These sensors are commonly found in mobile devices, such as accelerometers and gyroscopes. However, there are many challenges in HAR. One of the biggest ones is the inherent difficulty in collecting labeled HAR data. Compared to other data modalities, such as images and videos, it is almost infeasible to label sensor signals after they've been collected. So it requires a very high level of participation from the user during data collection, such as requiring them to wear a large number of wearable devices or to wear an extra camera. Also, there is a large number of variations between different setups, such as using different devices and sensors, different placements of sensors, or different sets of activities. And it is almost impossible to capture all these variations. So this results in a limited availability of high-quality, diverse, and labeled HAR data. In this table, I'm showing 5 of the most commonly used datasets in HAR, and we can see that they all come from a small number of subjects for a short duration of time. So my main objective is to improve the performance of deep learning HAR models by using large unlabeled datasets that are collected in free living environments with semi-supervised learning techniques. So now I'm going to introduce our method, which is called self-HAR. The main idea of self-HAR is to combine teacher-student self-training and multitask self-supervised learning to form a method that can provide stronger supervisory signal than the two individually. So for teacher-student self-training, it usually involves of 4 major steps. First of all, we train a teacher model with the labeled data in a fully supervised way. And then we run the trained model on the unlabeled data to obtain pseudo-labels. We can choose to perform further sample filtering at this stage to form the self-labeled dataset. And then for the pseudo model, we pre-train it with the pseudo-labels, so the self-labeled dataset. And then finally, we align the student model to the labeled data by fine-tuning it with them. In a recent study by Facebook AI, they have leveraged billions of images that are unlabeled for improving the performance of semi-supervised model for image classification. And they've shown that self-training increases the diversity of data coming from different sources and can effectively leverage unlabeled data. On the other hand, for self-supervised learning, it begins by designing a pretest task from which it is easy to extract labels from. In the area of HAR, the previous state-of-the-art study used self-supervised learning as the semi-supervised learning task. In their setup, they first begin with a large unlabeled dataset, and then they perform signal transformation functions onto them, so to generate self-supervised samples and labels. These labels indicate which transformation has been applied to the data. And then we pre-train a student model on this multitask dataset to identify which transformation has been applied. And then we finally, similar to teacher-student model training, we fine-tune the student model with a labeled dataset. And the set of transformations that was used in the previous state-of-the-art is a set of 8 time series transformation functions, which include adding Gaussian noise, scaling the data, applying a 3D rotation, etc. And this increases the internal diversity of data through signal transformations, which are itself augmentations on the data. So in SelfHAR, we combine the elements of these two methods to form a stronger method. And in the pipeline consists of 4 major steps. First of all, we train the model. We train the teacher model using fully supervised training on the label dataset, similar to what we do in teacher-student self-training. And then we perform self-labeling and filtering on the data. So in this stage, we run the unlabeled dataset through the teacher model to obtain the pseudo labels, and then we select the most useful samples to form the self-labeled dataset. At the third stage, we diverge from the self-training pipeline by applying signal transformation to obtain augmented views of the training samples to form a multitask self-labeled dataset, which consists of the augmented data, the transformation labels, and also the HAR labels. At the final step, we first pre-train the student model from scratch in a multitask setup, in both recognizing the HAR activity and also the transformation labels. And then we fine-tune the student model using the label dataset at the end. And the motivation for this design is to combine the both worlds of semi-supervised learning, where we can see that the self-training is able to draw data from different distributions, and self-supervised training is able to augment the data for the model to be invariant to certain transformations. And we hope that this will combine to form a stronger method to train the model. And here are some results for our studies. So first of all, we would like to study how well our method compared against other semi-supervised training methods in a setting where we make use of the full label dataset and also the full unlabeled dataset. Here in the table, we are showing the results on 6 different openly available datasets. So the first column corresponds to the name of the dataset. The second is the fully supervised baseline. And for this case only, we didn't make use of the unlabeled dataset because this fully supervised baseline isn't designed for that. And then for the third column is the transformation discrimination only pipeline, which correspond to the previous state of the art. And the fourth column shows the numbers for self-training only, which is an evaluation study that we did by isolating the self-training element out. And the last column corresponds to our self-HAR pipeline. From the table, we can see that out of all cases, our self-HAR pipeline is able to outperform the fully supervised baseline. That we can see that there are performance gains upon the baseline in all 6 datasets, which is not necessarily the case for the other 2 methods. Also, out of 6 datasets, our self-HAR pipeline was able to outperform the previous state of the art in 5 of them. And the one case that didn't outperform it, it didn't fall behind by a large margin. And we believe that it could be due to the HAR dataset having multiple different devices that might affect the performance of the self-training component of our pipeline. And further, we want to see how well our method performs when there is limited labeled data. And this scenario corresponds to a more commonly studied scenarios in semi-supervised learning, that we have a very limited number of samples. So here we limit the number of labeled samples per activity class to 2, 5, 10, 50, or 100. And from these 3 plots corresponding to 3 different data sets, we can see that the green plot, which corresponds to our pipeline, is able to outperform the fully supervised baseline, the blue plot, by a large margin in all cases. Furthermore, our method is able to outperform the previous state-of-the-art, the transformation discrimination only pipeline, which corresponds to the orange plot, especially when there are 10 or more labeled samples per activity class. It is interesting to note that in the case for motion sense, our self-HAR pipeline is able to perform equally well or even better than the fully supervised baseline, using only 10 samples compared to 100 for the fully supervised. And we also further performed evaluation on how different distributions of unlabeled data might affect the performance of our models. So here we selected 3 different subsets of the Finland dataset that we used for unlabeled training in order to evaluate how well each division might work for with self-HAR training. Here we can see that the Finland balanced dataset, which consists of a mix of the Finland inactive and Finland active dataset, performs the best. And this shows that how important a free living environment dataset is for self-supervised learning, because in the lab environments, we might be constrained to a particular set of data. And here, instead, in free living environments, we can collect a much wider variety of data for training. So to conclude, we propose SelfHAR, which is a method based on combining self-training and self-supervised training. And we have shown that SelfHAR is performant, where it outperformed the previous state-of-the-art semi-supervised training methods in the majority of cases. We've also shown that SelfHAR is data efficient, where it achieved the same level of performance using up to 10 times less labeled data compared to supervised training, with an F1 score of between 0.67 and 0.88, with only 10 labeled samples per class. This indicated the ability of leveraging a labeled dataset in increasing the diversity of data. And here are some of the references that I make use of for this presentation. So if you want to know more about our work, please feel free to visit any of the following websites or to get in touch with the email address at the top. And I would like to thank you for your time to listen to my presentation.